Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on another Thursday afternoon. I'm so glad that we have this time together, and I'm looking forward to spending a few minutes with you today. I don't know where you're tuning in from. Maybe you're in the United States, maybe you're in another country, but definitely do feel free to drop a line to me in the comments. I would love to know where our listeners are coming from. For anybody that's tuning in for the first time, my name is Evie. And my partner is Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. And we run a channel here on YouTube that talks about the economy, the environment, and we talk a lot also about energy. And we're looking forward to sharing little pieces of our lives with you, our farm, what we're doing here on our land. We've about 250 acres in Massachusetts. And our goal is to be as resilient as we possibly can, because you know, and I know that there are some hard times coming down the pike. And our intention is to help as many people as we can get prepared and be ready for what's to come. So grab a cup of tea or do whatever makes sense for you and join me here. I wanted to start off our time together today by just sharing a quote that I found that I thought would speak to the nature of where we are in this, at this time in history, at least. It says, we were not meant to live shallow lives pocked by meaningless routines and the secondary satisfaction of happy hour. We are the inheritors of an amazing lineage, rippling with the memories of life lived intimately with bison and gazelle, raven in the night sky. We are designed to encounter this life with amazement and wonder, not resignation and endurance. This is at the very heart of our grief and sorrow. The dream of full-throated living, woven into our very being, has often been forgotten and neglected, replaced by a societal fiction of productivity and material gain. No wonder we seek distractions. Every sorrow we carry extends from the absence of what we require to stay engaged in this one wild and precious life. And that was written by Francis Weller. There's another teacher that I really enjoy, and if any of you are not familiar with him, I suggest going and checking his work out. His name is Stephen Jenkinson, and he is very knowledgeable in the area of grief and death and dying. And the reason I want to talk about that today is because our attitudes around death, our understanding of death, it informs a lot about our lives today and the way we choose to participate in this world while we're here. And Stephen Jenkinson has created some wonderful framing around that. He's written several books on the matter. One is called Die Wise. Another one, which he got, I think, a lot of accolades for. Another book of his is Money and the Soul's Desire. And that is all about sort of for the love of money and how people have responded to, I would say, sort of the greed and turn that into the reason for being instead of something else. And he just has a very poetic way of speaking and a beautiful way of reframing things to make them more understandable and easy to digest. And he says that, being awake and conscious during this time in history is a grief-soaked proposition. And I really like that statement of his because I feel like it speaks to what we all experience as we look across out into the world right now, across the bow, out our window, turn on the news, out into the neighborhood, at our local grocery store, wherever we find ourselves, we can see that things are changing, that things around us are not what we've been told they were going to be. Our country has changed. Our families have changed. Our lives have changed. COVID changed a lot of that for us as well. And so he beckons us to something different, a different approach to the grief that's going on around us. And I like his way of framing that because he's not saying that grief is bad. He's not saying that you also have to cry and be a total mess to be in this world with integrity. He's saying that if you're choosing to be alive, it's important that you be with whatever comes through your system whenever it comes through, and to honor those emotions. And I definitely agree with that. And I found that nature has helped me to understand, our natural world has helped me to understand a lot about myself and a lot about human psychology and development and design, because nature mirrors back to us how we can be in the world in a way that's more native and less of a struggle in some respects. One of the things I love that nature's taught me is about balance and the need for balance in my life. It's so easy to get caught up in doing something full tilt and to neglect other things. And I love how nature gives us the seasons that she does. She shows us that there are different times for everything. There's a time for growth in the spring. There's a time for wild, reckless, crazy abandon in the summer. There's a time for harvest in the fall, and there's also a time for rest. And I feel like if you look outside in the natural world before we became so separate from it, it's evident everywhere that homeostasis is what this whole game is about, right? Our body system operates in a place of homeostasis and balance. There's night and day, there's darkness and light, there's wet and dry. I mean, there's just these opposites, but within the middle, you find a sweet spot where life can really thrive. And I find that to be interesting. And I find that there's just always something to learn, no matter how much you think you've looked at something. If I go back again and see it, I realize, wow, there's something I didn't realize about this creature. There's another piece of information to learn. There's a way that my brain will connect the dots and say, wow, I see how this is giving me a lesson about my own life and something I could learn about how to handle being a human being at this time. And it's sad to me that we feel so alone. Most of the time, I feel alone often in my thoughts and in my feelings and in my beliefs, because I've had to decide to be true to myself, which sometimes means that I don't always feel that it's easy to express myself around the people that I grew up with or the people that I used to be able to hang around. And since COVID, that's especially become true for me. My friend circle and family circle even has changed. There are certain topics I can't bring up, and it's painful to not be able to be my full self around other people. And I often ask myself what it is that's missing in our culture that makes me feel so alone. Like, what have I forgotten about being a human that brings me to that place where I just feel so isolated? And one thing that I find is this culture is so focused on go, 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 on do, do, do. We've forgotten how to be. We just have forgotten. And every time something happens that forces me to remember how to stop, I'm actually kind of grateful for it, even when it might be a painful lesson, like, hey, sorry, your car's not working today, or hey, you're sick, so you're going to have to deal with that and take some time away from what you thought you were going to do. We live in a world of so much activity, and on some level, although life is full of that, and to stay alive, you have to be busy doing things. I think that's true in the animal world for sure. I don't think that the plan for us having consciousness was for us to just ramp it up several notches and just go full tilt. I think we're meant to actually step back, slow down, make mistakes, which our culture, in my opinion, is not fantastic at allowing people to come in and say, I don't know how to do this. I've never heard of this before. And the reason I bring this up is because I've been in several circles in my life where there's, people that have risen high in academia or have, various educational degrees and stuff like that, or jobs. And I find that it gets awkward where I feel that pressure to sort of already know something that I might not have been exposed to. And as I get older, I care less and less about what anybody thinks. But as a younger person, that was definitely a challenge for me. And so I haven't been as drawn to academia for that reason, because I sometimes feel like curiosity is really where we need to be. And if it's not okay to be curious and it's not okay to not already know something, then how do we ever get to the place where we can actually learn it? And I also think personally that we've lost a connection to our spiritual selves. I feel like the mooring for my soul is a really critical part of my sense of wellness, my happiness, my sense of mission in this world. And I feel like the universe or God gives me energy to get up and do what I need to do every day, in part because I'm moored in that way. And I feel like it's fallen out of fashion in some respects in the larger culture to be spiritual, or it's become such an in-fashion thing that people do it just as a way of sort of showing the rest of the world how spiritual they are, and that makes me sad, because I think that there is so much to be gained by going on a spiritual journey ourselves and together, where we have open minds and hearts and curiosity for these things. And one thing I've also picked up from our culture is that in this saying, I think this cliche speaks to it, is that it's not about it, it's the journey is supposed to be more important than the destination. But at the same time, everybody is trying to achieve and get to this next level. And it's this focus on goals, which is fine. Goals are great. They help us get where we need to go in life, and it helps us think ahead of the moment. But I think, again, there's a balance that I'm trying to find between the goals I want to set for myself and also the being present in each moment that can help me to really take in what I need to take in and learn from whatever's happening around me. And I don't love that about our culture. I feel like technology, as much as I love it, has also taken away our FaceTime with each other. There's this sense of having caught up with somebody, right? Because you might have texted with them, or maybe you had a FaceTime conversation or something. But there's something that happens when we sit with each other in our lives, such as they are, having a cup of tea or a beer or cooking, sharing a meal. There's some exchange that happens that I think is really important for our mental health and wellness. And people are more isolated than ever, being in their jobs, working their butts off, exhausted, going home, not having any energy or time or space to have those kind of face-to-face encounters. And I feel like our hearts are suffering because of that. The other thing that our culture hasn't put as much emphasis on is our gut intelligence system. And it took me a really long time, because I was actually taught not to trust myself. It's a long story, but in my family of origin, it was more of I think the idea was like, you need to not trust yourself. You need to trust God instead, which I agree with. And I think God gave us this body and this amazing body system to be able to help us to articulate what we need to and learn from our environment. We have all these senses for a reason, right? And so I appreciate the gut system, the early warning system. And our gut has a ton of nerves, and it has as much activity almost as our brain, or at least second in command. And I've grown to really trust and rely on that gut instinct, especially when I don't have access to all the data yet, but I just know that something's off. This doesn't feel right, or this feels great. And I get a yes in my body. And I think that teaching our kids and learning how to trust our gut it's a super important skill. And it's tricky to learn because it's really subtle. It's not, this big event. It's a small, quiet thing. And if we're really busy and if we're drowning out all that quiet with other things, we might not hear it. I sometimes, even when I'm out in the garden, I like to listen to stuff because my brain wants something to chew on. So I'll listen to podcasts, or I'll listen to some music, or I'll be on a phone call. But how often am I really just dropping down into the quiet that is me, and not distracting myself with something because I better hurry up and educate myself about the subject, or I better hurry up and, meet these social obligations and call this person, but to just slow down, and to just be with Evie, and to find out what, between myself and God, like what needs to come into my mind and my heart and my thoughts. And so for this reason, I've found that doing one's inner work, and I call it kind of inner tracking. So for anybody that's done any hunting before, there's a there's a way that you can learn how to track yourself. And our brain is an amazing organism that has figured out how to protect us from lots of things. So, and I'm not going to go into all the psychology of it today, but it's really fascinating to me because for the most part, there's a program running, there's hardware, there's software, there's a program running in our mind. And those are the beliefs that were installed by our family and our parents and those around us. And if we don't second guess them, and if we don't examine them to see if they really feel true to us, we will parent, we will make major life decisions. We will do all these things from that place, and we'll think that that's the fate of who we are. And I actually think that what is that? Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. I think that is absolutely what will happen if we don't take the time to really do some inner tracking and see what's going on, see what our reactions are, see what our deep emotional selves have to say, see what other unresolved things are. Because I really want to know, like, what does it take to heal ourselves? And what does it mean to be a well-adjusted human during this time? Because as most of my teachers have said, in particular, a really lovely one, her name is Rose. She's been wonderful as a mentor for me. She says, hurt people. And she's right. Like, that's the default, right? And I'm sure many of you have heard that saying before. It's not an intentional thing that someone's trying to do if they accidentally say something or do something. It's not personal necessarily. They're following a script that they have. And if they went through trauma and they didn't examine it, it's really easy for it to happen again. And that's how a lot of the trauma in our greater world gets perpetuated. And so when I set out on my own journey to try and understand what healing looked like, I bumped into a lot of different modalities, and there are many to choose from. You could try, your regular sort of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one way to do it. I think any kind of support is great. And I think regardless of whether you've had, a really tough upbringing or childhood or horrific things happen or not, it's great to have a cheerleader, somebody that stands beside you and behind you, that knows your life, that you can be 100% real, truthful, honest, and open with about who you are. And if you really can find somebody that you trust, that can be a great relationship. It certainly has been for me, and it changed the trajectory of my life to find people that could sort of be the elders that I didn't have, that we don't have in this culture, and that I really miss and long for. Somebody that could whose sole job it was to just see where I was and what I needed in order to grow, and to support that in whatever way they could. And so I think it's a part of our job of becoming a sovereign human to reach out and find the resources that we really need. And so finding a modality is one of the big parts of that. I personally have had a lot of success with other body-oriented modalities, such as I tried internal family systems for many years. That was really good. That was about how you get to know that you have many different parts inside of you, and not in a like various sets of personalities kind of thing. Not that kind of parts, but that we each have, little people from when we were children, and they're almost like a personality or a person that lives inside of us. Those little people will speak to us or get triggered. And so you can tell if you're having an interaction with somebody and say it's over something really small, and on a scale of 0 being like no reaction and 10 being getting super upset and really triggered, you have a 10 happen. Well, typically it's not because of whatever interaction is going on in that moment. That usually means, at least per these modalities, that you're triggered because it touched something in you from the past, something that you haven't yet had a chance to look at and clear out of your system. And so Chris and I'm very grateful to say, have a fantastic relationship. And one of the biggest things that we've each done is to do our own work. And that has been so integral to us having a healthy, happy relationship, because before we did that, it was real easy to project onto each other different things, and for that to get kind of tangly, right? When you're living with somebody, it's like, is this my issue or is this your issue? Like, where do you draw that line, and how do you communicate about these things, and how do you let yourself feel vulnerable with a partner, especially if you've gone through some difficult things? So I would recommend wholeheartedly finding a good modality. The one most recently that I've been studying that I love is something called, come on, brain. Okay, I lost it. Anyway, I'll come back to it. I'm sure it'll come back to me, I guess. But, somatic experiencing work, sorry. Somatic experiencing work is, again, about just gently being with the nervous system until it can integrate different things, different memories, different sensations, and sort of being real present with yourself in any given moment, and waiting for your body to sort of offer up what it is you need to look at. And the reason I'm appreciating that so much is because part of the way I used to try and feel a sense of control over my life when things were very, very challenging and I was having a hard time, I would overanalyze my feelings and kind of perseverate on them as a way of feeling like I had mastered them, or that I had some kind of control. And I think that was just a coping mechanism, because I think it's great to analyze. I think it's wonderful to learn about your past and your story, and to be able to gauge what part of that is offering present day things into your life that you may or may not like. It's important to have awareness of yourself and your own history. And it's just been so wonderful to learn how to just be with those things, and to not try to direct where I need to go from here, but to just listen to my heart. And one of the biggest things that brought up for me how badly I needed to try something like therapy was when I became a parent. I was in college when I had my first daughter, and it was actually pretty wonderful in that I lucked out with an incredible kid, Jade. But additionally, so we were learning together because we were both just so young. I was in my 20s. And what became apparent to me was that even though I may not have liked all of the things I grew up with, and some of the patterns and things that the ways I had been treated, they were still inside of me. Like if I ended up getting really stressed out or just frazzled or run down or whatever, and I couldn't stay on top of it, those things would come right up to the surface, and you get really upset sometimes, like for some reason, you'll just find yourself sort of snapping and you lose all your patience all at once. And you have these little people that you're trying to teach and work with and practice, I was trying to practice attachment parenting, which I feel like is a sort of a newer way of looking at trying to be there with your child and not dictate everything and blah, blah, blah. But I was trying really hard to work through the things that I didn't want to pass on to her. But surprise, the patterns were going to just happen. Like it wasn't going to be from my mind that I could just decide intellectually not to do those things anymore. So parenting is a wonderful way to discover those hidden places in yourself. If you're wanting to do some inner tracking, just observe yourself with your kids or your grandkids, and you get to decide, like, is that how I want to respond? Is there a different kind of reaction I could have? And what is it that's informing that reaction? Because typically those, like I was saying earlier, those larger reactions are the result of our something inside of us getting upset, and it directs energy at something that really has no bearing on the situation. And it's kind of tricky to figure that out, and inner tracking and slowing things down and having a therapist can really help with that process, I've found. Another thing that I've noticed that's been really good is there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score: The Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, which is really good. And that book, I believe it's by Bessel van der Kolk. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but it's so good. It's just about how, again, the body holds a story. We think we hold a story here about what our life was like back then, but our body actually holds those energetic signatures for us. So if we really want to know what we went through, we just get to tap into our nervous system, essentially. And our nervous system will reveal and share with us what we've gone through. And that's the level that this individual feels that we have to kind of address things. Another approach that's been, I think, really helpful and informative for us, Chris and I, as we've been looking at these things for ourselves and for those we love, is something called the NARM model, which is the neuroaffective relational model. And that's a process that helps people heal complex trauma and PTSD, but looking through a developmental lens to try and understand, like, if you missed steps 1 and 2 because you had too much trauma going on as a child, you're going to need to sort of go back and start from the beginning. And the way that I love these therapies, because they're different from our regular cognitive model, is because they're getting at how we can't just talk our way through things, and that becoming a full human, a healthy human, it requires us to tune into our inner sort of map that I think we're all born with, and with building blocks, we have to actually create what it is that we've needed natively, and we can't think our way back there as an adult. But there are people that have that map, and the NARM model, NARM, has been fantastic. There's a book that they wrote that's just, it's like the cheat sheet. It's so good. But in every modality I've tried, what I've really been called to and what I've appreciated is this idea of the hero's journey, of running towards the roar, of choosing to do what you know you can't do, but that you have to. And you do it. You do it even though it takes all your effort. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It's a slow process. It's a softening process. It's the true process, I think, of getting to know who you are at your core. And I love the invitation to do that and to honor that, because it is really, truly an honorable journey. When we take the time to go inward, this is a world that is yet unexplored, like the ocean. There's so much we don't know about and understand, and is not shared with us. We're not educated about this, right? And up until recently, I think in the United States, it seemed like people didn't talk very much about their mental health. It wasn't even really discussed unless you had an issue with it. And as somehow that was separate or not connected to your body, right? And as we know, how we eat, how well we're sleeping, our physical wellness affects our mental wellness. Our mental wellness affects all of our physical wellness. Like they're tied together in this inextricable way. And it really takes some re-education or some learning some new things to be able to appreciate the fullness of that. It's still something I'm studying because I find it fascinating. And I want to learn how to be a better human, and I want to contribute whatever I can to this world while I'm here. And I'm probably not going to come up with, brand new insights that other people haven't. But at the same time, I think it's each of our jobs to sort of comb through what we've been given, to decide what we want to keep, what we want to maybe toss and adopt something different. And then to be the best guide and mentor we can for those that are coming behind us, right? And so I don't freak out when I feel kind of sad anymore or when I get upset, because I feel like the emotions are kind of like the weather. They just happen. And it's important to let them through. The more you try to push them off and compartmentalize them and make it so that they're not in existence, I think the worse they want to burst out. It's like squeezing jelly in your hand. Like it's just going to come out through all the cracks of your fingers. And I think as a woman, the feminine in me really wants to be able to flow too. And that's another thing about our culture that has been challenging for me to find my way around, is how can I be a woman? How can I be the strong, courageous human that is really pretty badass sometimes, but also I have different types of needs than a man does, and I need to be able to follow those things, and I want to be able to flow. And I feel really fortunate to be with a man who can hold that masculine so I can be in my feminine. He holds, the data and the structure and the this and the that, and then I can flow into the areas that I'm good at and do my part. And that just feels really good. It's my opinion too that, the masculine and the feminine are deeply out of balance. And because we're so busy trying to do what each other can do, we're not specializing anymore as much, women being women and men being men. We're all trying to be what each other is. It's just, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And truly, I don't believe that a man can understand what it's like to be a woman, and vice versa. I think we're unique and perfect as we are, and there's a reason nature made us that way. And I also believe that tears are essential nourishment for the growth of our soul, and it's important to let them fall and to cleanse you as they do. And I think it's an inherently good part of doing our duty as humans to, let the steam out, let the pressure out, and to at least let that inform us about ourselves and our lives, but to clear that as well so that we can see clearly other people, to work with our own projections, to work with our own judgments, to understand where those judgments came from and how they got installed and who installed them and whether or not we want to keep them and all of that. I think it's an essential part of leaving behind a world worth inheriting, which is what Chris and I talk about a lot on this channel and what we talk about back at Peak Prosperity. For anybody that's interested in checking that out, we talk about all sorts of topics. And one of them being that we want to leave behind a world worth inheriting. And, coming out of this time of relative ease compared to other times in human history, we feel fortunate to have been given what we've been given in terms of technology and all of the creature comforts. And as a result, we feel like it's our duty to leave something better to the folks coming up behind us. So, and I am going to take a second now to just look at the live chat and see what everybody that's hanging out there is doing. see. I think everybody's mostly chatting with each other. Humanity Lane said, healthy, happy relationships is so important. Time to be together and having fun with shared experiences, but also time apart. I absolutely agree. And let's see. Oops. The bee farmer. Hello. Hello to everybody. I'm so glad for anybody that was able to make it. It's fantastic to see your names. I recognize a lot of them, which is fun. So let's see. At any rate, it's hard to pick things out, and I think it would be fun to do this in the future a little bit more. I promise I will figure out the technology where I can have a live stream, be outside, which is where I feel like I'm in my element, and be able to socialize with all of you, which just takes a little tweaking. Because I'd love to show you in real time, like all the things, our cows, our chickens, our gardens, our fields, our soil, our fruit trees. I can't wait to share that with you. So I'll keep working at this to try and learn some new things here in my spare time. But in the meantime, let me just leave you with this. I think this poem is just so beautiful. It's called The Journey. And it's by David White. He says, above the mountains, the geese turn into the light again, painting their black silhouettes on an open sky. Sometimes everything has to be inscribed across the heavens so you can find the one line already written inside you. Sometimes it takes a great sky to find that first, bright and indescribable wedge of freedom in your own heart. Sometimes, with the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. You are not leaving, even as the light fades quickly now. You are arriving. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a fantastic weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you again here next week. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.